She was called a scammer, humiliated at the counter, and told to leave, until the bank's big screen showed her son was one of their most celebrated clients. Helen Bradford always believed in handling things with grace. Even at 62, there was a quiet dignity about her. That morning, in her soft lavender church dress, she clutched a crisp envelope. Her son Anthony had mailed her a check $9,800. Just something to help out, he'd said, after her water heater went out. Helen wasn't one to ask for money, but Anthony always reminded her it was thanks, not charity. The bank, a branch she'd visited for years, felt different now. More screens, fewer familiar faces. She approached a young teller with sleek hair and long acrylic nails. "Helen." "Hi there," Helen said with a smile. "I just need to deposit this check." She slid the signed check across the counter. The teller glanced down, her eyes narrowing. "Teller, is this yours?" she asked, barely hiding her suspicion. "Helen?" "Yes, ma'am. It's from my son. He sent it yesterday." Yeah. The teller picked it up with 2 fingers. "Teller, do you have an account here?" "Helen, yes, I've had one for years." The teller typed Helen's name, then looked at the check again. Teller, "Anthony Bradford." "And who exactly is that, Helen?" "My son." Teller, "What does he do?" Helen. Helen's throat tightened. "He works in renewable energy. He owns a company, Bradford Solutions." Teller, "This check's almost $10,000. I'm gonna need to verify this, Helen. You can call him if you'd like. I can even give you his number." The teller just stared. Then, without a word, she picked up the check and fed it through the paper shredder beside her desk. The sound, though not loud, was deafening. Helen's mouth opened slightly. "Helen, excuse me?" she managed, stunned. "Teller." The teller shrugged. "If it's legit, he can issue you another one." "Yeah. But we don't process suspicious checks, especially not for that amount." She gestured to the next customer. "Next, please." Helen took a step back, her hands trembling. She moved toward the waiting area. She thought that was the worst of it, but something on the wall was about to change everything. Helen sank onto a cold vinyl chair. Her stomach was twisted. What hit hardest wasn't the shredded check, but the way the young woman looked at her like she was a scammer, like she didn't belong, like she couldn't possibly be connected to someone successful. Minutes later, a branch manager, Stephen Greer, appeared. He looked at Helen from a distance, whispered to the teller Danielle, then disappeared into an office. He never approached Helen. Helen's eyes fell on the bank's large digital monitor. It cycled through slides of local partnerships. Then her heart stopped. There, smiling in a sleek charcoal suit, was Anthony Bradford. Her Anthony. The caption read, "Bradford Solutions CEO Anthony Bradford speaks at the Gateway Economic Inclusion Summit presented by First Guardian Bank." She blinked. It was still there. Another slide showed Anthony shaking hands with the mayor, his company's logo above the bank's, a partnership announcement. Whispers rippled through the lobby. Teller gasped, her eyes widening. Suddenly, Stephen Greer rushed out of his office, moving fast. "Stephen Greer, Helen Bradford?" he asked, approaching her seat. "Helen?" She looked up slowly. "Yes, Stephen Greer. I think there's been a terrible mistake," he said, voice low but urgent. "Could we talk in my office?" Danielle's face behind the counter had gone pale. The manager looked flustered, sweating, as though the screen had just reminded him who he'd dismissed. Helen stood, her back straight. "Helen? I asked to speak to a manager 30 minutes ago," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Stephen Greer." "Yes, ma'am. I truly apologize. Please, come with me." Helen followed him into his glass-walled office. She stood. "Helen, are you sorry because of what happened, or because my son's picture showed up on your wall?" Stephen Greer's face flushed. "No, ma'am. Well, yes, that played a role, but mostly I'm just embarrassed. That's not how we treat customers." "Helen," she shredded the check, Helen said calmly. "Didn't ask for my ID, didn't call to verify it, just assumed I was lying." Greer looked down at his hands. "Helen, do you know what that check meant? It was from my son. A man you've plastered all over this branch. I raised him on my own, worked 3 jobs some years, and today I stood at that counter while your employee treated me like trash." She paused. Imagine how she treats someone who doesn't have a son on your digital display. Greer looked like he'd swallowed a stone. Stephen Greer. I'll call the central office. We'll get your funds replaced immediately in full if your son can confirm the original amount. Helen cut in. I don't need you to fix the money. I need you to fix the thinking. The atmosphere in the bank had shifted. Word was spreading. Stephen's phone rang. It was corporate. I've already heard, he whispered to Helen. Stephen Greer, we truly hope this doesn't affect our relationship with Mr. Bradford. Helen stood. That depends. She walked out. She stepped into the main lobby. The digital monitor cycled back to Anthony's photo and his quote, "We rise by lifting others. Progress means everyone, not just the privileged." Danielle's station was empty. Teresa Delgado, a kind older teller, Teresa Delgado, called out, "Mrs. Bradford, I just want to say I'm sorry. That should have never happened. Your son's doing amazing things. You raised a good man." Helen's eyes watered. "I did my best." The drive home was a blur. But the next morning, things would no longer be confined to that bank lobby, because Anthony Bradford was on his way to the branch, and he wasn't coming quietly. The morning sun illuminated the First Guardian branch. Anthony pulled up in his Tesla. He came alone, in jeans and a navy windbreaker, his company's logo stitched small on his chest. But the moment he walked through the glass doors, the energy shifted. Stephen Greer and two staffers waited nervously. Someone had already posted a blurry photo of the bank's digital screen with Anthony's face on Twitter, captioning it, "Imagine shredding a check from this man's mother, then playing his promo video 5 feet away." It was viral. "Anthony, you know why I'm here?" Stephen Greer. Greer extended a hand. "Mr. Bradford, we are deeply sorry for the way your mother was treated." Anthony didn't take the handshake. "Anthony, where's the woman who shredded the check?" Stephen Greer. "She's been placed on administrative leave." "Anthony, is that the same as fired?" Stephen Greer. "Not yet. We have to follow protocol." Anthony looked him dead in the eye. "So your protocol is to protect her job before protecting your customer's dignity." Few people in the lobby watched. "I'm not upset," Anthony said, his voice firm. "Upset would be yelling. This is calculated." He handed Greer a folded paper. "Anthony, this is a list of every organization my company partners with that banks with First Guardian. If you want to keep those accounts, I suggest your corporate office make a public apology today. And your staff, they don't need diversity training. They need basic respect." An older employee, Arthur, stood up. "Arthur, Mr. Bradford, I've been here since this was a credit union. I'm ashamed of what happened yesterday. If someone treated my daughter like that, I'd be right where you are." Teresa Delgado stepped forward. Teresa Delgado, she didn't even ask for ID. "Helen's been banking here longer than most of us have worked here, and that girl looked at her like she was a criminal." "Anthony, my mom has never bounced a check. A check was the first time she said yes when I offered to give back what she gave me. And your teller shredded it like it didn't mean anything." Turned to Greer. "You can't undo what happened, but you can show people what kind of institution this is, or isn't." Stephen Greer. "I'll contact corporate immediately. I'll tell them everything." Anthony. "Good. Because if this happened to someone whose face is on your screen, what's happening to the people who aren't?" He left. Outside cameras were arriving. The internet was just getting started. Anthony's phone buzzed nonstop. Interview requests poured in from national outlets. The story wasn't about him. It struck a nerve. It was about a mother, an assumption, a casual humiliation that reflected something deeper. He called Helen. "Anthony. Morning, Ma. How are you holding up?" "Helen, I'm all right, but I've had better bank visits." "Anthony, I'm proud of you. But don't let this thing eat you up. You know how the world works." "Helen, you always were stubborn, Anthony. Learn from the best." Anthony drove to his office. People were outside his building with signs. "I'm not a CEO. Would they shred my check too?" He posted on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. "Yesterday, my 62-year-old mother was accused of fraud at a bank she's used for decades. An hour later, my face appeared on the bank's digital wall as one of their featured clients. Think about that." By noon, the post had over 6,000 shares. A radio host read it live. Callers shared their own stories of being questioned, denied, or dismissed because they didn't look right. A journalist from the St. Louis Dispatch wanted to feature Helen. Anthony agreed if his mother wanted to. "Anthony, Ma, there's a reporter who wants to talk to you." "Helen, Lord, I don't know if I'm built for all that, Anthony. You don't have to be. Just talk like you're talking to me." The article ran, They didn't know her son was a CEO, but Helen Bradford's story speaks for thousands. Helen spoke plainly, telling the truth, and it resonated louder than any demand. News channels picked it up. A morning show debated, if Anthony's mom hadn't been connected, would anyone even know this happened? First Guardian Bank issued a second, longer apology. It had Helen's name, mentioned the teller by title, and promised an internal review. But it felt flat. No real accountability. Anthony's college friend, Jared Combs, a legal analyst, called, "You thinking lawsuit, Anthony?" "No, not yet, but I'm thinking visibility. This isn't small anymore. Exactly why I have to handle it right." The more people listened, the more stories surfaced. Hashtag Helen Bradford trended. People were tired. Helen, though she didn't want to be a symbol, became the voice of that exhaustion. Anthony strategized with his PR manager, Keisha Owens. "Keisha Owens, what you've said already, calm. Claire, not angry? That's what's making this hit harder. You're not ranting, you're just telling the truth. Anthony, I'm not trying to go viral. I'm trying to get heard." They agreed on one sit-down interview, focusing not just on him, but on his mom. On how everyday people get treated worse because they don't have a face on a wall. The interview was taped in Helen's living room. Dana Wu. "Mrs. Bradford, when you walked into that bank, did you expect anything like what happened?" "Helen, no, baby. I was wearing my church dress. I even brought my ID. I thought I'd be in and out." Dana Wu. "And when she shredded the check, what went through your mind?" "Helen, I thought, if this is what they think of me, then what are they doing to people who don't look or sound like me? Folks without a clean dress and a CEO for a son?" The clip got 3 million views. The bank's headquarters scrambled, issuing a third apology. Customers began recording account closures. A retired teacher, Brenda Milton, posted a video about being told her check was stolen. A barber, Desmond Lee, tweeted about a denied SBA loan. An Iraq War veteran, Troy Nivens, spoke at a town hall about not being trusted with a business account. The stories piled up. Assumptions, doubt, dismissal, polite condescension. The common thread wasn't just race. It was the arrogance of institutions. Helen didn't want to be famous, but she accepted being heard. The bank tried to arrange listening sessions, but trust doesn't heal on a schedule. Anthony later sat with Helen. "Anthony, did you ever think something like this would happen?" "Helen, not like this. But I always knew my day would come. Every person who gets stepped on quietly, we all wonder if there'll ever be a day someone notices. That was my day. I just didn't expect it to be about a check." Anthony knew the real challenge wasn't just responding to the moment, it was turning that moment into movement. 2 weeks later, Helen spoke at a financial literacy workshop for seniors, organized by Anthony. "Helen, when I was 23, she began, I got denied for my first checking account. No one told me why. I didn't argue, I just left. I thought maybe that's how things worked. Turns out, that's not how things work. It's just how some people get treated. And if you never speak up, they keep treating you that way." The room applauded. Young volunteer, Marla told Anthony, "I brought my grandma today. She's never trusted banks. But after hearing your mom talk, she's thinking about giving it another try." "Anthony, that's all we're trying to do. Restore a little faith." Helen accepted her role in the change. First Guardian Bank's customer retention dropped nearly 14%. They issued emergency bias training and overhauled teller protocol. They offered Helen a settlement. She turned it down. Instead, Anthony and Helen launched the Bradford Funda, modest foundation for financial education and community grants for those dismissed by institutions. They started small, 2 rooms above a barbershop. But word spread. In 6 months, the Bradford Fund helped over 80 individuals open accounts, trained 50 bank staff in Dignity First customer service, and funded an elder financial abuse hotline. Helen worked there part-time. "Helen, you don't need to fight loud," she often told volunteers. "You just need to be right." Anthony continued leading his company, dedicating Thursdays to the foundation. He spoke about how bias shows up in the smallest transactions. "Anthony, my mom didn't ask to be treated special. She asked to be treated normal, and that says everything." The bank never fully recovered its reputation. But that was no longer Helen's concern. She had a garden to tend, letters to fold, and young people to encourage. What started as a single check, destroyed in a moment of quiet judgment, it became something far bigger, a reason for people to speak, to listen, and to act. Sometimes change begins in the most ordinary places, at a teller window, in a waiting room, or sitting across from someone who simply expects to be seen. So if you've ever felt dismissed, ignored, or made small in a room where you deserved dignity, remember Helen. Remember her grace and her quiet power. And don't let the moment pass in silence. If this story moved you, take a second to subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to keep stories like Helen's alive, stories that matter, stories that could easily be yours.